Thank you everyone for joining me today. My name's Luke Young. I'll be taking you through this masterclass where we'll go from the very beginning. So let's start off with the home page then. So this will be the initial setting up of your account. So here you've just got a nice little welcome message. There's nothing else to it. On the right hand side, this is what we call a dynamic field. So this, every time you load this page or you log in, it will pop up with something else, and it will just be some sort of additional services, anything that may potentially benefit your business. So keep your eyes on that. You might find something that you find super handy. So in this example, Snap, which is an expense app that you can download for your mobile. I'll cover that as well when we go into the expenses section. Next up, you've got things like creating your invoices and recording your expenses. Now, you could see this in a way of actually setting up the account. So this could be a running order, but the important thing to start with, as you'll notice on both the expenses and the invoices section, is adding your bank account. That is the foundation. So if you don't have a bank account added to your Crunch account, you're not really going to be able to get far with a lot of this stuff. So why don't we jump in and quickly have a look at setting up a bank account. Now, you can either click this button here, or you could head over to the banking section. So I'll use the sub menu just to show you, and then you go to accounts and cards. Once you're here, if you've got no bank accounts entered, you'll see this screen here. If, however, you've given it a go and you've got perhaps one set up and you think, okay, no, that's not quite right, I'll add another one, you just use this icon down here. This is just an add new button, and you'll see you get the same options, new bank account or credit card. Now I'm going to go ahead and just create a new bank account first. The first thing you'll need to do is enter this field here. It's a display name. Now this can be called whatever you like. This is your reference point. So if you do have more than one business bank account, if you want to keep it super simple, you could call it current. You could even do current one, and then if you've got another one, current two, and so on and so on. This is just to help you distinguish different bank accounts if you do have more than one. So on this occasion, I'm just going to set this up as the current account. The bank is simply the provider. So we'll go this. Now the opening balance, this can sometimes trip quite a lot of people up, to be fair. And you'll notice that you've got some text here that says this is the balance at the start of your first financial year with Crunch. Now what that means is, say we'll take today's date, right? So on the 25th of August at the moment. So the balance that you enter there, if your business existed before the 6th of April this year, and you're only just joining us now, we only need to know what the balance was going to be on the 6th of April this year, because of course you're only going to be accounting for items that have happened from this start of the financial year, because that's the year that you're joining us in. Now, some of you, perhaps if you are just starting out, will have a zero balance, and leaving it as zero is absolutely fine. But as I say, if you have traded for a little while and you have had transactions in and out of your bank, you need to be sure that you're looking at that bank statement, finding the 6th of April and finding the very first transaction on that date and putting that balance into this field here. That way, you're going to be able to just simply backdate everything to the 6th of April and just catch yourself up for the rest of the year. In this example, I'm just going to leave that as it is. And again, going back to your question again, to Paul, you have to specify actually whether it's a business or a personal bank account. So you select either of these options here, depending on which one you're using. And then you just need to confirm that it is a pound sterling bank account. Unfortunately, we can't accept foreign bank accounts in this bookkeeping software. So just make sure that you do have a UK-based bank set up. Lastly, sounds simple enough, sort code and account number. Now, one thing I do want to highlight and stress is it's really important for two reasons, one of them more so than the other. The sort code and account number actually gets attached to your sales invoices when you start generating them and sending them to clients. Of course, you want to make sure that you get paid into the right account. But secondly, there's a feature that we have called open banking. Some of you might be familiar with this term, and this is it's a free banking feature that will actually allow you to have your bank statements automatically fed into your bookkeeping software every single month. So whether that's HSBC, whether it's Santander, make sure you put the sort code and account number in correctly. And then when we go on to banking, I'll show you what happens. because the system's actually quite smart and intuitive in the way that it will know from your sort code whether you're able to enable this free open banking feature. So I'm going to go ahead. Now I'm just going to completely make one up. As I said, put the correct ones in, don't do what I'm doing now. And then I'm going to go ahead and just save that. So you've got the card of the bank account here. You'll see it says current, which was the display name, sort code, account number, and so on. Now, I was briefly talking about open banking just a moment ago, and what you're looking for, if you have a sort code that that has the open banking, is this icon here. So if you enter the information correctly and it's a sort code that's recognized, you'll see this little symbol where it says a free feed is available for your bank. All you need to do, I think it's about 3 or 4 steps, is select connect your bank. Now I'm not going to press that now, because what will happen is it will take you through to your banking portal. So whoever you're with, whether it's Halifax, HSBC, the journeys will be slightly different for all of you. But once you've pressed that button, it will then ask you to enter in like I think it's your ID number and certain other verification questions. And that's it. Once you've done that, your open banking feed is set up and your bank statements will automatically get put into your Crunch account every single month. And if you wanted to add more bank accounts, perhaps you've got a credit card that you want to add, use this little icon down here that I mentioned earlier, select new credit card, and you fill in more or less the same details. I won't bore you to death and do the same thing again, but you'll notice the questions are very, very similar, even the opening balance question as well. So hopefully that was short, sweet, nice and simple. So make sure you've got everything that you need in there. And now we'll move on to sales. So this is where you're going to start building your client base, so who you're invoicing. You can actually use Crunch to send invoices directly to your client. So you don't have to faff around with downloading it as a PDF, manually attaching it to an email, then sending it off to them. It's just a really long-winded way of doing things. You can do all of that through your account. So first things first, you want to make sure that you've got your registered business address in here. So you pop that in here. Now again, I'm going to completely make one up. Okay, save my business address. And there you go, business address has been updated. So now what you can do is begin invoicing. So I'll go back to the dashboard. You see this field down here, your clients. Now these are all of the people that you're going to be working with or potentially working with as well. And these are the people that you're going to be charging for your services. It's probably easier to think about all of the clients that you've got currently and then put all of those in here first. And of course, as you start to build your client base, you can just add new clients as you go through. So if I go ahead now and just press new client here, so top right corner, this little blue box, all you then need to enter is a few details about them. Now, I'm aware it says company name, but you can put individuals' names in there as well. So pay no mind to that. This can either be a business or an individual. So I'm going to go ahead and be really creative and use John Smith. You can also specify what type of currency you're going to be charging that client in. So whether that's pound sterling, you've also got things like dollars, Australian, Canadian, and US dollars, and euros as well. Now, this in particular, this item here, default invoice currency, means that whenever you raise an invoice for that particular client, it'll always be in that currency. You've got your payment terms. Now, this is entirely up to you. This is just literally how long you're giving that client to pay you for your services. So you can be as kind as you like, or you can just leave it as 28 days. So I'm going to put 2 weeks. So I expect any invoice that I send to John Smith to be paid in Australian dollars, and I expect that payment within 14 days of completing my service. Now, the other additional fields here are entirely up to you. You'll notice they don't have these little asterisks or bolded. So up to you. You can put their phone number in if you like. If they've got an email address or if they've got a website, that's fine. The important contact information, though, is actually done in this section here. So if I press add a contact, again, I'll pop the same info in here. And now I put their email in here. Telephone and role, they're not essential. The important ones are these two, so just make sure you've got these two in. And then you see this little checkbox here, include in email. You want to make sure that's selected. Now, If, for example, you're working for a large organization and you've got multiple contacts, maybe one week you work with a HR department, the next week you're working with a payroll department, whatever it is, you can actually add multiple contacts within this. So you could have, if it is an organization, the business name here, and then the individuals' names within that organization all listed separately here as well. Again, I'm going to show my creative side. Put this in here. Okay. And then you can determine who is the primary contact of that organization. Now, the primary contact just means that whenever you raise an invoice, that's where the software is going to expect the invoice to be sent to, but you can change it, and I'll show you how to do that when we go to raise the invoice. So if I leave those two, so I want John Smith to be included in the email, you can of course include both, so I'll check both if you want to. And then next up is the billing address. Now, the billing address is their trading address. So this is really important because this is where your invoice is going to be almost legally bound to. So this is the address that you're charging the money against. So I'll put an address in here. Leave that all as it is. If they've got a, if it's an EU client and they've got a VAT number, once you change this field, so you can specify where their business is located, and if it is an EU member, this field will become unlocked. And if you've got their VAT registration number, because you might need to consider, well, if you're VAT registered, something called VAT EU MOS, which I'm not going to bore you to death with, but you will be able to put their VAT number in there if you need to. Next up is just a note. So this could, you don't even need to use this, to be fair. This could be maybe a personal thank you message. It could be whatever you want it to be, and that will just go alongside the invoice. It'll actually show on the invoice as a little text field, but I'll leave that as it is for now. And here we go. This is the super important one, of course. You want to be paid. Your client's going to want to know which account you want to be paid into. So if you do have more than one account, they will all show up here, and you just pick the account that you want to include. And then you'll see you've got the name, the account number, and the sort code included as well. So super easy. And lastly, I just want to highlight not to underestimate the late payment reminder tool. It can really save you on a lot of awkward conversations, I have to say. I mean, if you want to change, if you've got a good working relationship with them and you've got no issues with reaching out personally and asking them if they are late, where's your money? That's fine. You don't need to use it. If, however, you want to automate some of this stuff, you can set up late payment reminders so that the system will actually start chasing automatically. So let's say, for example, John Smith didn't pay me within the 14 days specified. I can then say, okay, right, I want a late payment reminder to initiate 2 days after the expected payment date. And then if I don't receive it after the 2 days, I want them to go out every 2 days thereafter. And those will continually go out every 2 days until the moment that I have received my payment for my invoice and I've logged that the invoice is now settled. You could either just send yourself a nice little nudge, again, if you just want to give yourself a sort of a nudge on, this person's late, and then you want to do a bit more of a personal communication with them, fine, just leave that as you. Or if you don't mind and actually you want to give yourself a reminder as well as have the automated nudge, you can do both, you and client. So I'm going to save that now. There we go. So we've got a client created. Super easy, super quick. Again, I would recommend just thinking about all of your client contacts, who it is that you're going to invoice. Maybe if you are doing backdating, this would be really handy. You can just quickly run through them all, add them all in, and then you can start backdating your invoices that way as well. But in terms of actually raising the invoice, you want to go to sales and then invoices. Okay, and what you've got here is, again, it's almost like a dashboard of sorts. So you've got some filter menus here at the top, who your clients are, the due date, the issue date, and so on. And then you want to press new invoice. You can either use this one here or this one here. So we'll go to new, and then you've got this drop down menu. Now, if you've added your list of clients, all of them will appear here, and all you need to do is simply select who it is that you're invoicing. If you've forgotten to add a certain client, not a problem, just use the new client button here. Okay. Now you'll notice, because I selected John Smith, it's entered his information here automatically. It's also selected the invoice currency that I specified earlier. So I'll leave that as it is. You then need to say when you're issuing the invoice to your client, you can either type it in. If you're backdating, you can put dates in the past. If you're just doing it for bookkeeping purposes, you can use the calendar. Or if you are doing it on a day-to-day, you can just press today. Now, a client reference, this is simply if you've got a specific numbering system. So if you are using something like a timesheet or a self-billing invoice and you want to marry it up, from something you were doing before you joined Crunch to where you are now, you can do that. That's absolutely fine. Just put that number in there and then you can keep that nice and tidy. PO number is a purchase order number. I'm not going to bore you to death with that. Again, I'll share our help center with you at the end so that you know all the ins and outs. Payment terms you'll see is stayed exactly the same. However, if, say for example, Mr. Smith did push his luck one month and I thought, actually, do you know what? I'm not going to give him 14 days now. I'm going to give him 7. You can change that still, not an issue. And likewise with the currency, if he changed his mind and said, hold up, I don't want to be paid in dollars anymore. I actually want to be paid in pounds instead. You can change that there as well. I would just leave this as this one here, simple. And then I'll show you very quickly. You then add your line for your services. So description of what it is that you're doing. You then add the amount together, okay? And then you'll see here it said VAT none. So if you're not registered, the system's not actually going to allow you to add VAT because you're not registered, therefore you can't charge it. If you are VAT registered though, doing this method will add 20% VAT on top of the net amount. So you'll end up then with 1,000 net total plus £200 is the VAT, leaving you with a gross total of 1,200. So that's nice and easy. If you wanted to add a discount, I think I mentioned that earlier. So if you wanted to say, if it was mates rates or whatever it might be, you wanted to knock off a couple of £100, you can do that. And then you'll have that on separate lines as well. If you wanted to chart, if you wanted to separate specific services that you've done, you can just keep adding line items and then keep adding them that way. That's absolutely fine. If you need to edit anything, you've got the pencil icon. If you need to delete a line item, use the cross icon. Now, that's the simple way of doing. If you're just charging an overall cost, okay, that's a nice simple line item setup. If, however, you're doing something like charging by hourly rates, you want to change it to detailed instead. And you'll see this time the fields change. So if I go back to simple quickly, description, net, VAT, it's a nice and simple one as it says. If I change to detailed though, you'll see it now changes to rate, quantity, and the net. So for this one, I'm going to say my services again. I'm going to be charging an hourly rate of £25 and I have done 8 hours worth. And once I've saved it, again, you'll see the system does all the calculations for me. I haven't got to sit there and try and work it out. I just need to say, right, I'm charging this by the hour. I've done this many hours. And then the system works out the total. Again, the same rule applies with VAT. If you're not VAT registered, the system's going to know and it won't let you charge it. If you are VAT registered though, the system will also know and it'll add the VAT on top for you again. And like you had with the simple one, you can add discounts, you can edit, you can delete as well. So we've got a line item. Again, you can add a note as well if you want to. Again, I'll leave that blank for the time being. Bank details are included. There's my late payment reminder automatically set up. And then lastly, there's the attachment options. So if you do want to add supporting documents, you can drop those there. Now at the bottom, you've got 2 options here. You can either save it as a draft. So this is handy in particular if, let's say, you're just sort of putting the feelers out with a potential new client, and actually they don't want to accept the invoice. They haven't accepted the invoice, but they want to know what you would charge first. So you could save it as a draft, and you could then just send that draft to them as an estimate or a quote instead. So I'll quickly do that now. So if I save this as a draft, you'll see we get taken back to the sales dashboard section, and then it's sitting in draft. And then all I could do is just use the options menu, create quote or estimate, or download it as a PDF. So you've got a couple of options there. I'll quickly do this one now. Then you say, right, is it an estimate or is it a quote? Download it as a PDF, you ping it on through to them. So super quick, super easy. If I just jump back into that though. Okay, now what you've got here is something. So the second option next to where it said draft was preview and issue. And if you press that button, this is what you'll see. So you get a summary of the invoice. So here's all the details that we entered. You can edit it at this point. Say if you spotted something was incorrect, you know, it's not a legal document at this point. So while it's in draft state, you can edit, you can delete, do whatever you want with it. If, however, you're happy and you've got these two options, so again, going back to some of your questions earlier about, well, I don't need to send it. Actually, I just need to use it for bookkeeping purposes. The only option that you need to use then is this one, issue invoice. It's not going to go anywhere. You're not going to email it to anybody at all. What it does do, though, is makes it a legal document and it keeps it on your records for your bookkeeping. If, however, you do want to email it through to your client directly through here, use this option instead. So I'll use this as an example. And as you'll see, because I selected both the include an email box earlier when we set up John and Jane Smith, they're both selected here. If you only wanted to send it one or the other, you can do that, that's fine. Here you've got the email subject. Now this will just carry over, this is a dynamic field, so this will just carry over the invoice number as well. Obviously you can change that, and the same with the email content itself as well. Once I then press send, you'll get the confirmation message that it's been sent. And you'll notice here now, where it originally was in a draft state, it's now changed to outstanding. So you've got status labels on your invoices alongside the issue date, was it emailed, when is it due, etc. as well. Now, when you get to the point of, let's say, the invoice becoming overdue, you know, if it is late, this status label will change to red and it will actually say overdue. Let's say though that John Smith has paid me. So in terms of recording the payments, you just find the invoice. So we'll use this one here, use the options menu, scroll down to record client payment here. And then you enter the details of that payment. So received today. So again, you could do this for bookkeeping. You know, you could just raise the invoice, issue it like I just showed you, and then just go back to record client payment on that particular invoice, enter the date that it was received. So you then need to say how it was received, transferred into which bank account if you've got more than one. Did you receive the full amount? Yes. And then which invoice is it allocated to? Now you can do partial payments. So let's say actually, so you'll see here, it's currently showing 200 and there's also 200 associated to the invoice. Let's say, however, that they shortchanged me a little bit and only paid me 100. So I would say, right, I received 100. I'm putting £100 against this invoice. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and save. You'll see it still says outstanding because I've still got £100 that's not been paid off yet. Let's skip ahead maybe a few days and say, okay, well, it was an oversight. John has now paid me. You go back to options, record client payment again, do the same thing. Amount received 100, 100. I'll save that. And this time it's now saying that it's paid and settles. So really quick, really easy. Sorry, excuse me. Another important feature that some of you might benefit from is recurring. So this can be really handy if you are doing maybe self-billing, you know, you're charging the same amount at the same point every single month. All you need to do is set up the initial invoice like we've just done here. So let's say that I am working with John continuously over a certain period of time. You then go to options, set up recurring invoice, and then you can start to create a schedule of your invoice. So how often do you want it to repeat? Well, I'm going to do it monthly, repeat once a month on the 25th of each month. It starts next month because we've just created that one now. You can even specify when it ends as well, if it's on a specific date or after a certain amount of time. So if you're working with them for 6 months, so after 6 times, stop the recurring invoice automation. Do you want the system to automatically issue it as well? Absolutely, that would be one of the reasons to set something like this up. And do you want the system to email it automatically for you as well? Yeah, of course. Do you want a reminder that this is going to happen? Yeah, why not? So then you'll get notified, by the way, we're just about, 2 days before the next invoice gets sent, you'll get notification from Crunch saying, by the way, you're just about to send an invoice to this client. So I'll go ahead and press create. That's now done. So if I now go to this recurring invoices section, you'll see there's our schedule. John Smith, monthly on the 25th, for the total of £200. So hopefully that was really simple, actually. There's a lot of features involved. Again, anything that you do need additional support with invoicing, I'll show you. I'll share the help center that we've got at the end. There's tons and tons of materials on there covering things exactly like that, walking you through it step by step. So I'd highly recommend bookmarking that once I've shown you the link for it. So hopefully you found that helpful. Again, if you've got any questions, I'll have a quick browse through these at the end of the session as well. I'm conscious of chewing your ears off too much, but hopefully you've absorbed quite a lot of what goes into the invoicing, how to do it, and things like that. Let's quickly jump into expenses then. So this is where you're going to start recording all of your purchases. So whether that's subscription costs, whether it's travel fees, food, lunch, that, anything like that. These are really, really important to enter because you want to make sure that you're able to offset certain things against your tax bill at the end of the year. So any items that you're paying for that serve the business, that you're using for business purposes, you need to make sure you're chucking those all in. So like we did with clients earlier, the easiest thing to do here would actually be think about everywhere that you're buying items from, or people that you're buying items from. So that could be individuals, it could be businesses, if it's materials that you're buying, you want to think about everything like that, and then go to the suppliers section and then just start reeling off. I've got a subscription for Adobe, so you'd set up Adobe as a supplier. I pay for public transport, you put public transport as a supplier. Anything like that. So if you go to the bottom right and select this icon here, it's really, really quick this, so you'll be able to churn through this in no time. So let's say I'm just going to go with Adobe. So I've got a supplier that I'm paying a subscription to. You can then set a default expense type. So this just means, well, what are you buying from these people? So in this example, let's do professional subscriptions. And then you press save. And that's it. Again, I'll do another one really quickly. So let's do public transport. Now, one thing worth bearing in mind is in this example, I'm keeping it quite generic, right? So I'm not listing that I'm traveling with, TfL or Brighton and Hove buses. I'm keeping it quite generic because in reality, HMRC aren't going to care who you travel with. They're not even going to care who you've eaten food with, to be honest. All they care about is that you're logging the correct amounts and that you're recording it each month. So for certain things, public transport, food, everyday items, I would say, keep it as general as you possibly can, right? So then that means whenever you do spend money on food or transport, you can just use one supplier and just start logging all of your expense items under that one supplier. And I'm going to set this one as public transport. Now the default expense type, it says optional. You don't have to enter one at all, but I would recommend it because when you then create expenses for public transport, that expense type's already going to be selected for you, and I'll show you that in just a second as well. For more niche expense items like maybe Adobe subscriptions or Dropbox or cloud, web hosting or anything like that, you probably could be a bit more specific to the supplier name, but certainly with everyday stuff, don't bother. They're not going to care where you're traveling or who you're traveling with or where you're eating. So now that we've got a few suppliers set up, let's go ahead and create an expense. So if you go to expenses, as seen here, go to create an expense if it's your very first one, or again, use the bottom right icon here. Now this is super, super easy, right? So you can select the supplier, almost like you did with your invoicing. You selected your client. This time you select your supplier. So I'm going to go ahead with public transport. You then need to enter the date. So when is it? And if you're backdating, you'll see that you can go back. That's absolutely fine. I'll go back to July. You can attach files. So again, receipts. Now receipts are really important. There's I guess there's almost an illusion sometimes that because everything's digital now, you don't need to keep your receipts. And in some respects, that's right. But you have to make sure that there is a record of it, even if it is a photo. So paper receipts, photo receipts, scans as well, I suppose, if you're doing that, you've got to keep them. And strangely, you have to keep them for 6 to 7 years as well. You know, again, just in case HMRC says, hang on, I want you to show me everything from the last 7 years, because we want to make sure you're paying the right amount of tax. You can then back that up with receipts, copies. You know, digital copies are fine. And actually, I think a lot of people are changing to that now, unless you've still got a shoebox full of receipts, which I know some people do. I did up until a short while ago. But HMRC is switching to a digital taxing system now. So by all means, ditch the shoebox, start snapping the photos instead. You can attach those, drag and drop them on here. You can add notes as well. Notes are more, I guess, to help you differentiate between different things. So again, if you are using a generic supplier like public transport, and perhaps you wanted to specify, well, actually, I did travel with TfL, or I went with a different train line, or even the journey itself, you know, you traveled to London one day, Birmingham, and you wanted to do that, fine, use the note field there, but you don't have to. And then next up, you've got your items. So like, this is almost like the line items on the invoices, really simple. So what is it? You know, so this was my to London train ticket. And you'll notice, because I've selected public transport and I'd already specified the default expense type, it's already selected that for me. So again, not going to save you hours, don't get me wrong, but it's just nice to know that I don't have to worry about that because it's already set. Now, the interesting thing about this as well is the VAT element. Of course, it can be super confusing. Does it have VAT? Doesn't it have VAT? There are some expenses that are exempt and even deemed outside of the scope of VAT. And you'll notice that public transport is actually one of them. And I haven't pressed anything here. The system's just said, hang on, you've picked an expense type of public transport, therefore I'm going to put 0. Now, that isn't to say that the system gets it right every single time. There's actually some food items, for example, that do and don't have VAT applied to them. So you want to make sure that you are at least checking the receipt to see if there has been any VAT applied to it, and then you can change it accordingly. Okay, just because the system says, well, hang on, this is public transport 0, doesn't mean that it's going to stop you from changing it if for any reason it does. So I'll leave that as 0, but if I was to change this supplier, keep your eyes on this bit down here, these two fields. So I'm going to change this now to Adobe. You'll see it's changed it for me straight away because it knows, right, okay, this is a standard subscription. There is going to be VAT, and therefore we're going to add VAT onto it. So I'm going to put that back to public transport, and then I'm going to put the amount in. So that's just the total cost. And again, I just want to show you what happens with the VAT. You'll see here, you've got the total amount 12 with no VAT added. If I now change that to Adobe, you'll see it does actually separate the cost for me. So I'm going to sit there and work out which VAT element, well, what is the VAT element? Just let the system do the work for you. So I'm going to quickly swing that back to public transport. And then lastly is the payment. So how did you pay for it? Nice and simple, out of my business bank account. Again, if it's a personal account, don't worry if it says business bank account, just use the account that you've set up initially, and then you can save that down there. And that is it when it comes to creating expenses. Now that's the nice and easy way. There are some additional bits and bobs that you probably might want to take note of, and this is the credit note and refund section as well. So if, for instance, I was Adobe, let's just say that's for a license, and that was for £5. I mean, that's a very cheap Adobe license, but I'm going to run with it. And then I want to say, right, actually, they took, you know, too much, or maybe they've given me some money back for whatever reason. So I want to credit some of it. So I'm going to say, right, the date that they credited it back to me was the 25th. How much was it that they paid me back? So let's do half of that amount. Let's just say it was a discount. Okay, and how much did they actually pay me back? So into current, they gave me 250. So they gave me 250 credit, which took it from £5 to 250, you know, and then they gave me the 250 back. I'm going to press add to expense. There you go, expense has been added, and you'll see down here this credit note. Then I'm going to go ahead and save. Okay, and then that's shown there as well. Now, if you are doing a list of expenses, so if you are backdating and you just want to quickly whiz through things in categories, you know, say you've got all your public transport items that you want to just smash through in no time, you can just use this icon here. So on the right hand side, you've got the pencil, the bin, and these three little icons here, dots here. Pencil is just your edit options. So if you press that, it's going to take you back to the edit menu. The bin icon does what it says on the tin, just get rid of it. And then lastly, if you do just want to keep sort of rolling through similar expenses, use the dots and then do create another like this. And it'll actually predetermine a lot of the items for you. Just be wary that you do have to change some of the details like the date, the amounts if that changes. But I guess the important thing is the amount if you're just sort of rinsing and repeating through travel tickets in this example. So I want to quickly show you recurring. So with invoicing, like I said, you can automate certain things if you're using self-billing. So you do the same for things like Adobe. So let's say you have got a monthly subscription. There's no point you sitting there every month at the same time, putting the same, same amount in, maybe just with a month later date. So go ahead to recurring expenses, go to create a recurring expense, pick your supplier. So I'll go with Adobe. And again, you'll see similar questions as we had on the invoicing section. So once every month, when does it start? Does it end? Does it never end? So I'm going to leave that as never because it's in this example, it'll be an ongoing subscription. You've got the similar options as before. No, chargeable to a client, add a reference if you want to distinguish it as well. So let's go through and do this. And then I'm going to say, right, that's going to be 60 quid every month transferred out of this business account. I'm going to then save it. And there we go. We've got a schedule now set up so that it runs for £60 monthly on the 25th. And it'll even tell you when the next occurrence is going to happen as well. So, and you'll get these status labels here active. If you want to disable it, you just delete the item. It's not going to remove any of the expenses that have been created previously. You're literally just going to disable the recurring event itself. If you did specify an end date, when it hits that end date, this active label will just change to inactive or something along those lines as well. Okay. So that's it for expenses. There's not really much else to them. They're really, really simple. The only thing I would say, actually, while I'm here, and I'll show it towards the end in the add-ons, is check out something called Snap. It's an expense app that you can download for iOS or Android, and you can synchronize it to your Crunch account. So I think you get a token. So you're in your Crunch account. You get given a code basically, and you put that code into Snap expense app. And those two sync together. What you can then do is while you're out and about is you literally take your camera, scan the receipt, it will read the data off the receipt, so the line item, the amount, whether there's VAT on it as well, and it'll actually put that data into your account for you. So you haven't even then got to get home and sit in front of your computer and start keying it in. It'll just be there waiting for you, just simply by taking a photo. So I'd strongly recommend checking that out. It's super, super handy. There's two versions. There's a light version, which will give you 15 uploads per month. And then there's an unlimited version, which is paid for, but I think it's about £3 a month or something like that. So I guess depending on how many expenses you've got, one or the other should suit you fine if you wanted to have a look into that as well. Now, I'm not going to keep you much longer because I am conscious of the time, and actually bank reconciliation is a bit of its own beast entirely. So what I might do actually, if you did find this session helpful, is I might expand on this session and do one purely for bank reconciliation so that we can go through all of the ins and outs on, formatting bank statements, how to upload them, what to do if you can't get open banking. But for now, I'll quickly just take you through what it is and how you can do it. So you want to make sure, of course, you've got your accounts all set up. And here you'll see you've got things like none to match in bank, 5 to match in Crunch. This label here means all of the data that you hold in your account. So we've just created 5 different pieces of data. So we created a couple of client payments and a handful of expenses. So this now shows here that we've got 5 items in our account. The none to match, the reason it says none is because I haven't got a bank statement uploaded in this account yet. Now, open banking, as I mentioned earlier, will automatically feed your statements into your account every single month. So what you'll find is that this number starts to increase as your bank statements are uploaded. And then once you've done that, you'll then be able to start reconciling and matching your entries together. Some other items on here that you might find of interest are things like, of course, money transfers. If you've got different accounts and you're putting some money into a savings account for the business, you can do all of that through here. It's really simple. Just which account is it going from and to, the date and the amount. There's not much else to it. Bank deposits, or if you're injecting any of your own personal money into the business, you can log all of that here as well. And then ultimately, you know what the business owes you back at any point when you're able to pay it back to yourself. Any interest that you might receive from banks, for example. So if you have got something in a high yield return bank account and you're getting quite a decent amount of interest back, you can record all of that here. And then lastly, of course, how do you record that you're paying yourself? So how do you reflect, right, the business has earned this amount of money, but I'm taking this amount of money? You just go to withdrawals, select new withdrawal, specify when you took the money, specify how much you took, out of which bank account. Again, if you have more than one, save. That is it. Okay, now you're reflecting that you're taking money out of the business to be used personally. When it comes to certain things like your account settings, right? So perhaps you do want to, if you move, maybe if you change your business name, anything, right? In the top right-hand corner, you'll see this drop-down menu here. You go to settings. There's your business name. You can edit that. At the moment it just says my name, but if you want your invoice to say a specific business name, change that there. Again, if you move address, update your business address there. There's your business logo. So you go to business logo, choose the file, drop it in there, upload it, and then you can even see an example of what it will look like on the invoice as well before you start sending them out to people. Just be mindful that there is a limitation in the respects of a 200K size, and it has to be a JPEG or a PNG file. So in truth, if you wanted to do all of that first before you started invoicing, that's a good way to do it. Go through your settings, make sure you've got, of course, your business address, name, and things like that all correct, logos, and so on. While we're here, actually, another thing that you might find helpful is when you do a self-assessment. I mean, if you want Crunch to do your self-assessment, we of course be more than happy to. But if if all you're doing is using Crunch to store the information, bookkeeping purposes, and then you want to take it to different accountants, maybe you've got a friend who'll do it for you, that's fine, absolutely fine. We're not going to sort of hold your info ransom. Just export it. So you can just go to export your data, and then from here you can select every single piece of data either as a whole, or if it was only certain things, select them individually instead. And then you can export that into an XLS spreadsheet, and you can hand it across to whoever you need to as well. So that's it when it comes to settings. While we're there, you've got your subscription section as well. So this will tell you what you currently get with Crunch free. If you're a free member, if you're a pro member, it will look different. You'll have different labels and things like that as well. And you've got some additional bits and bobs like add-on services, things of that nature. You can check out what different packages we've got, things like that. The other thing I wanted to show you just while we're here is I mentioned the help center. Now, don't underestimate this because there is so much on there. I mean, off the top of my head, I think there's about 580 articles, and that sounds really, really daunting. But you'll be pleased to know that we have actually built an integrated help center so that you can just press this icon up here. You'll get a little pop-out box here. Now, depending on which section of your account you're in, this will change. So if I go to, let's go to expenses, you'll see it then brings up automatic articles automatically that are related to expenses. So it's quite intuitive in that respect. You can of course still search if there's something that that doesn't pop up here. I mean, you could keep pressing load more, for example, and it'll just take you through all of this stuff. You can search it as well. But if you wanted help on startup costs, I'm going to press add startup costs here, and it will then just jump you through to the relevant article as well. So that's just something to bear in mind. Again, it's really handy to actually to have something like that built in. You've also got items like business guides. So this is anything from self-employed startup guides, what expenses you can and can't claim, how you can even look to generate new leads, things like that. So you've got tons and tons of resources here at your fingertips. Obviously, if you're a Crunch Pro member, just give us a call and we can have a chat with you as well. If you're a Crunch Free member, you've got everything that you need to basically walk you through everything. So, you know, if you wanted to upgrade to our packages, absolutely fine, but rest assured, there should be everything here for you regardless. Again, as you scroll down, you've got things like Crunch Community Forum, which I'd strongly recommend checking out. It's actually quite new, the forum. You know, we've just started putting something together now where we're hoping to build a community of people where you can sort of chat amongst yourselves, you can share stories, you know, perhaps even skill swap with each other, you know, work together hopefully as well. So I'd strongly recommend checking that out. Knowledge articles, again, that's almost similar to our help center, but bear in mind the help center is software focused, so that's where you'll get all of your walkthroughs for using all the features in Crunch. The knowledge center, this one here, this is where you'll find things like tax code, tax year changes, so income threshold changes, anything about VAT changes, maybe IR35, stuff like that. You'll get all the info there. And then we've also got a collection of help videos. So if you'd rather sort of watch and do rather than read, that's fine. You've got a collection here to help you through that as well. So I think that's probably it from me, really. I guess the last thing, well, the only thing I suppose I could show you now is just the add-on section. And this applies to both Free and Pro, by the way. So if you are ever of interest in checking out any of our additional services, so things like, you know, debt collection, there's the Snap app that I mentioned earlier as well. There's also something called Tide. So if you are claiming mileage, you've got a mileage allowance that you want to do, that's a mileage calculator app as well. Trip Catcher is a mileage app. Tide is one of our banking partners, so I think I mentioned that earlier with the during the banking section, and then some other bits and pieces here which I won't bore you to death with. You can have a look at those, and there's the Revolut as well. I think someone asked a question about that earlier. Anyone that I haven't answered questions to yet, don't worry. I'll get a report of all of this afterwards anyhow. So I'm going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and I'll start plucking out the ones that I wasn't able to answer during this session, and I'll get back to all of you individually. So once again, thank you all very much. Just to make you aware as well, I want to make sure, of course, if we do any more of these in the future, that I get your input. You know, hopefully you found it useful. So I'm just going to drop you a quick survey afterwards. Don't have to answer it, you know, but I'd greatly appreciate any feedback, any comments, just so that I can make sure that we're doing this in the right way, that we're covering the right stuff, and we're doing right by you going forward. So again, thank you very much for all of your time. I hope you have a fantastic day today, and I wish you all the best. Take care.